Welcome back, everyone. Today we are revisiting what I personally feel is the best overstable mid-range in the DGA Discraft family, and that is the DGA Quake. One of the main reasons why I feel this is one of the best overstable mid-ranges out there is because of its feel. Overall, slight to moderate dome in most of the plastic types, has a very shallow feel to it, and that makes it great for both backhand and good for forehand. However, if you can get it in the first flight, those ones are very flat. Heck, they're practically puddle topped, making those the perfect ones for forehand. So if you can find one of the first flights, hang on to that thing. There is nothing else in the DGA Discraft lineup like the flat top first flights. But we'll get into more how the flight compares to the other plastic types later. So how does the Quake fly? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Quake is an overstable mid-range, and it also has a decent amount of glide for being a very overstable mid, but it's not an excessive amount of glide, so you don't have to worry about this thing hanging in the air and blowing past the basket. One thing I love about the Quake is how torque resistant it is. Now, some of the plastic types, as you're going to see, are a little bit more torque resistant than others. This one that you're seeing here thrown in the field is from the 2022 Tour Series, and these ones are kind of in the middle to slightly more on the understable side of the Quake. So if you're looking for a more workable version of the Quake, this is the one you're going to want to go for. It has still good torque resistance. As you can see, I can rip into it on a hyzer, or I can rip into it flat, and it doesn't get almost any turn at all. It just rides straight, and then as it slows down, it just has that nice arcing hyzer finish. And then when thrown on a forehand, you can get a little bit of turn. It's a little workable, so if you put it on a slight anhyzer line, you can get it to hold decent flex shots, which is, I think, with at least this plastic, is one of my favorite shots to throw with it. And overall, if you do want a more overstable version of the Quake, well, guess what? You are in luck, because there are more overstable runs that are actually pretty easy to get a hold of, so you don't necessarily have to break the bank trying to get one of those first flights. You just want to go for the first flight if you really want that flat flight blade feel. So I mentioned those flex shots. There you go, right there. Nice, gentle flex approach, and even on forehand, beautiful, effortless flex lines. This is such a great overstable mid where you can really work it, and then again, just trust it's going to hyzer out. It's going to land right next to the basket. So as I mentioned earlier, the Quake does come in other plastic types, as you can see here, and actually a good amount of plastic types, both baseline and premium. So if you want to have a baseline that's going to season faster, or premium that is going to hold its flight characteristics longer, there is the Quake for you. Now again, these first flights are the most overstable. I can rip into this thing as hard as I want flat, and it just rides dead straight, even into a headwind, and has a nice predictable finish. If I am wanting something that's going to hold straighter, and then just at the very end of its flight check up, that's where I'm going to use the granite. And by the way, these things break into an incredibly straight flying mid-range with just a good amount of finish at the very end. Now let's go out and take a look at some of these different plastic types side by side. Taking a look first at that 2022 Tour Series. Again, this one is, I think, for slower arms is going to be the perfect one, at least in premium plastic, because it's going to be very overstable for a medium slower arm, but it's workable in the mid-flight with that strong finish, so you can really trust it on those flex shots. Now, I mentioned earlier, you don't necessarily have to find a first flight to find a very overstable Quake. As you can see, the regular Pro line actually mimics the flight of the first flight very closely, particularly for backhand, where I feel the major differences between them is in the forehand, and that's why I like the first flight more than the regular Pro line. For overstability, they're very close, but it's mostly a feel thing. I like flatter, more shallower discs, and that's why I prefer the first flight over the Pro line for forehand, but in general, they are both very overstable. And then when it comes to something that's going to be straighter, again, go for the D line, go for the granite. Those are going to be very nice and straight. They'll still have that finish for quite a good amount of time. However, they will season in and just be a perfect straight flying mid-range. Well, thank you all so much for joining me on this revisit of the DGA Quake. As always, please subscribe if you haven't already. A lot of big things are happening with Cheating Lefty Disc Golf in the future, so stay tuned for further updates. Also, be sure to follow me over on Instagram. Huge shout out to my sponsors here for the end of 2022, Discraft and Disc. Thank you everyone, till next time, keep banging them chains.